Can anybody guess where I'm at? Yeah, it's right up at Lowe's. I figure, you know, that bow fishing rig that I put together was alright to get you through, but I'm going to do a little bit better on the budget build. Now these right here are driveway marker poles, and I went to Academy Sports and picked up a replacement slider kit for bow fishing arrows and a 3-pack of the bow fishing arrowheads. Arrowheads were $5.95 for 3 of them, and the slider and the hardware and all that, I believe I got enough to make 3 arrows. If not, I've got an extra shaft. But anyway, that was like $10 for the sliders, the stops, and the bumpers and all that. And then it was like $9 for 200-pound line. Now if you look, they're already tapered at the end for knocks, so that's going to make things a lot easier. And then let's see, I got my bow fishing reel. It's a PVC drain glue in, and look at that, it's already got holes in it for mounting bolts and attaching the line to and all that, and it's pretty smooth, so it ought to work really good for a reel. And then I got the bolt, it was a carriage bolt to mount that to the slingshot with, and then I got a Black Widow slingshot to put all this on. So anyway, let's get to the office and get clocked in at work and get to playing. So now we got our Black Widow slingshot, and I've already taken out this upper screw and drilled it out, and I took apart the whisker biscuit that I'm going to use, and I just drilled all the way through, and I'm going to use a self-tapping screw to run all the way through, most of the way through the handle, so it'll lock the handle back down. I'm going to leave that just a little bit loose because I got a second one I'm putting in just below it, just to kind of, that's the wrong one, just to kind of help stabilize it. And that's just about where I want it. I want it up just a little bit higher, so I'll slide that up. And now I can tighten up these 2 screws. Now I got this whisker biscuit here on Amazon, and it was like 13 bucks. So it wasn't too bad. Now, the reason why I drilled all the way through here is because I'm going to shoot some epoxy in this handle once I'm done, because I'm going to be removing most of these mounting screws for this handle. Like this one down here is most likely going to be the mount for my bow fishing reel, which will be this one down here, and it'll be angled up this way, so it'll actually be level whenever I go to shoot. And looks like that whisker biscuit lines up pretty good. Now for my bow fishing reel, there's the line. I paid $9 for the line. This is going to be my bow fishing reel. It's just a glue-in plumbing drain cap. And let me find my bolt. Anyway, this bolt is going to go through the handle of the slingshot somewhere at an angle about like that, and there'll be a nut that goes down on this side of it to lock it down. Find out which hole I want here. There we go. And then this end will have a nut and a washer on the back side, and I could spin it down and put me a nut and washer on the other side, so when it's done it'll look something like that. And I could spool my line on here. I'll have to wrap me a little bit of tape around that to make it more comfortable, But I could spool my bow fishing line on this, and I want to anchor it to the slingshot itself instead of this because it's honeycombed, which might make it a little bit weaker. But I chose the honeycomb one because, number one, it already had a hole in the center. I mean, dead center, so I didn't have to drill a hole there. And we're trying to make this easy and simple. And number two, all these waffled holes is going to make that a little bit lighter, because I was looking at some of the plumbing caps and they were pretty heavy. But what I want to do is figure out the angle I want this on here. And once I get my angle figured out, I'm going to mark the side so that I can set my drill bit at that angle and drill the hole clean through. Because if you look, we got 2 bars here, and those 2 bars stay consistent all the way around. There's a loop where these two connect, so this one will come down, loop around, and come back up. Also, another quick explanation: the reason why I'm messing with slingshots for bow fishing is because I'm in a kayak most of the time, and it's going to be hard to use a compound bow or a recurve or a crossbow out of a kayak. This is going to be compact. It's going to be real easy. I can still get my quick shots off like I would with a recurve, and it's also cheap. It's easily replaceable. You know, so it's going to work best for what I need. And I figured, you know, I've looked online and I've seen some of these bow fishing rigs for slingshots that are $100, and I'm like, I could do better than that. And anyway, let's go ahead and get this reel put together and that hole drilled. Got my holes drilled. I went ahead and filled this up with epoxy, and added some electrical tape to it so it's a lot more comfortable to the hand. And I also bent these 2 arms so that I could change the angle of the slingshot a little better. Makes it a lot more comfortable. And it should make it more accurate, because I like the angle of that better, because it makes the whisker biscuit more straight up and down whenever I go to shoot, so it'll be less drag. And it feels a lot more like the shape of my recurve bow handle, as opposed to holding a pistol pulling back on the top. And I should be able to actually open my hand up and let it free float when I shoot, just like I do my recurve. Alright, so now we're going to run us a nut down on that and drop us a washer on there. Spin this on, put us on another washer and another nut. And I've put the 1/2-inch wrench somewhere. Oh, look at that. I was actually being good and I dropped it in the toolbox again. So we tighten that up. And there is our homemade reel. I'm going to take that little burr off there. Okay, this part here was $4. It was 43 cents for the bolt. I already had the nuts. Whisker biscuit was $13 on Amazon. And we have $9 in the line. Academy Sports. I got the Game Winner bow fishing tips, and they were $5.95. And those are the tips there. It came with 3 of them. Let's see. Okay, here we go. The sliders and knocks, which I've got a couple of those in my pocket, for making 2 arrows. They were right at $9. I dropped a couple of parts there. And then these 2 fiberglass rods I got at Lowe's, and they're already tapered at the end for a knock, so I could just epoxy the knock directly on there. And these sliders just I mean, they fit it better than some of the bow fishing arrows that I've used. I mean, they slide really good, and I've heard of problems with people having these things not slide very well and snagging up. So I don't think we're going to have that issue with these fiberglass rods. These were $2.99 a piece, and I bought 3 of them. And they're a lot longer than what I need, so I'm going to have to cut those down. And then when I put the heads on, they fit on there perfect. I could epoxy those on and then put a pin through to make sure that they don't come off. So now that the bow is ready, let's get the arrows ready. You guys can see how my workbench gets all messed up. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put me a knocking rope on my slingshot band. It'll be easier to knock the arrows. I need to heat that up with a lighter and make it a little bit skinnier so I can feed it through. There we go. That ought to work. I let it pop out. There we go. Now these holes were already in the band for this Black Widow slingshot. The slingshot, if you don't already have one, these Black Widows are nice because they come with some pretty decent bands. But if they don't have enough power for you, you can get online and order bands, I think, all the way up to 60 pounds. Which I really think 60 pounds is kind of overkill for bow fishing. I usually like to go 25, 30 pounds, and that's plenty because I don't really end up shooting that far out of a kayak. And we just pull that up like that, and there's my knock point now for my arrows. So I just drop it in the whisker biscuit rest and then run it back here and knock it here. And I'm going to cut this extra off and then burn it so it doesn't fray out. And if you burn it this way, oops, got my lighter. Yeah, okay. If you burn it this way, you can use the melted paracord to kind of lock that knot in. And once you get it melted, you can just rub it on the lighter like that, and it will put that molten plastic down into the fibers of that and make a really strong knot that probably will never come loose. Now, the thing you got to watch out for whenever you put these nocks on these shafts is your knock is going to be indexed this way. So when you put your stop, you want to put it on top. You don't want to put it on the side. You want to put it dead up on top. That way it doesn't catch as badly. And I'm probably going to trim these down just a little bit on top so that this will pass through with very little drag at all. I could also, on some of these whisker biscuits, this one's plastic, but on the metal ones, you can just take and bend them open just a little bit to give you a little bit more clearance. Let's see, I cut the shafts down to about 32 inches with a hacksaw. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the knock on and install the bumper. And I'm probably going to just wing it and go about 3 fingers up from the knock and put my stop here for my slide. Otherwise, if you don't have that stop on that slide, it's just going to blow right off the end. And you want to put your slide on before you glue your knock and your point on. Because if you don't, then you're going to wind up cutting either the knock or the arrow point off to put that slide back on there. So slide on before the knock and the point. And if you don't want it to fall off, you could just throw a little piece of tape on each side of it so it doesn't slide off. And then once you get ready to set up your arrow with your line, then you can just take the tape off. Our 1/8 inch drill bit drilled for our slide, and we've got our slide bumper ready. Now these slides, when you put them on, it's not just one block, it's got a little spacer that goes up inside of here too. It's just a little square block that fills in this square space that has a round hole in it. And you just take your mounting screw for it, put it through there, and find your Phillips screwdriver wherever it ran off to. There it is. And run that screw in. And there's your slide stop with your bumper installed. So when you shoot, this doesn't come back and smash the knock, and it's got little bumpers on there, so it'll stop it from destroying your arrow from hitting it so much. But eventually, they will come off, and you just replace them. I'm just going to use this piece of cardboard that came with the fishing chips to put a little epoxy on, and we'll cap that epoxy. Oop. I had the cap backwards. There we go. And I'm just going to use the end of the arrow shaft to mix that epoxy up. And wipe off some of that excess epoxy. This is Loctite 3,500 pound epoxy, and it's a slow setting epoxy. And the reason why I wanted to use a slow set epoxy is because it still stays slightly flexible once it sets up. And we'll smooth that off a little bit with some epoxy, and we'll put a little dab right there where I drilled through the shaft. I didn't want to drill all the way through, but that was my fault. I got a little excited with the drill bit. Alright, now we go around to the other end, and we'll just lay on some thick epoxy. And put our fishing head on. I'm going to twist it into it and get rid of that extra epoxy that I have on there. And once this dries, I'm going to drill through this hole here, and I'm going to pin that so that it'll make sure that tip don't come off. Now, there's one. It's nice that these rods are already tapered. And yes, I know I need to install the slide, the stop block, and all that, but I'm going to go ahead and put this knock on while I'm at it so I can index the hole that I have to drill. And smooth out the extra epoxy. And this will be my spare arrow. So I've got my knock and my fishing broadhead glued on to the next shaft. Throw that epoxy away, I'm done with that. Now what I was saying about that little block, if you look, this side is curved and this side's flat, so the curved side obviously goes up against the arrow shaft, and then you've got this small block that takes up this gap, and you just push that up in there, and you drop your screw in, and the long side goes towards the slide, and you just set that in your hole and that you've drilled. Now this is an 1/8 inch hole in this arrow. I just used a 1/8 inch titanium drill bit, which kind of overkill. You don't need titanium to drill holes in fiberglass, but that's what I've got. It's just a little cheap 1/8 inch drill bit. And you just run that screw in and snug it up. And there is shaft number 2 ready to go. And I'll use that same 1/8 inch drill bit to drill that hole out and then put some kind of a pin in there. I'm not sure what. I'm actually thinking about just running a screw through it and then taking it to the bench grinder and knocking the 2 ends flat, which actually sounds like a pretty good idea. I think I'll go ahead and do that. Oops. What is it snagging on? There we go. And where's that screw at? There it is. I'm just going to run this screw through here, and then I'll grind the head and grind the head off of this screw, and that arrowhead should not come off anytime soon. Once that epoxy sets up and all that, we should be golden. This is the bench grinder at work. Mine's bolted down, so don't yell at me about that. I don't want it to get too hot, so we'll cool that off. See, if I was at my shop at the house, I'd just take a pair of heavy-duty cutters I've got and just cut it off. But I don't have that here. You know what, it'd probably been smarter just to take a hacksaw to that, put it in the bench vise, but hindsight, you know. But this is working. There's not much more left. There we go. Now that head's locked on, it isn't coming off. Now, if you're going to take a few practice shots with these heads, you just unscrew the point and take them wires off and screw that tip back on to practice. And if you want to practice bow fishing, find you a creek or something like that and get you a like a 1 liter bottle and a chunk of pool noodle and some string. And you tie the string to the pool noodle and put a bunch of rocks to sink that 1 liter bottle. And you tie that 1 liter bottle to the pool noodle and you set it at a depth of 1 foot, 2 feet, whatever. You vary the depth, and you change up how deep you got it and your distance. And just take practice shots at that bottle, and you can actually take the point off, so you're just using this, and find you a bolt so you've got a bludgeon tip. That way you don't ruin your good fishing points. But just screw you a bolt down in there and take you some practice shots at a bottle that you sunk underwater, and you got a pool noodle to keep it from sinking all the way, and keep from losing it so you can get it back out of the water when you're done. So, looks like all we got to do now is just string the line on this thing and put a couple of notches for the line on that reel, and we're ready to go out on the water. For attaching the line, I made a good lock knot on that bar, and then I've notched this with a hacksaw so the line will slip through there. And then I just start at the back and wrap it forward. Oh, my spool flipped. I don't want to twist the line. That's what I'm trying to avoid here. But if you do twist it, keep it pinched tight. That way, whenever you get to the end of the line, you just keep holding and elevate the spool or the arrow, whatever you're rewinding, and it'll take all the twist that you're putting in out. And we're going to go ahead and do all 30 feet. I mean, I paid $10 for 30 feet. I might as well use all 30, right? Okay. And the next thing that I'd like to do is just carve me a little notch in the edge of that. That way I can come around with my line and put it down on that notch, and it'll kind of hold it so it doesn't all fall off the reel. Because if you don't do that, whenever you point down or whatever, all that line's going to come off that reel. And the reason why I notched it that way is so that when I shoot, it pulls it right out. And it's not very much of a notch, it's just a little bitty notch that I carved in with my knife so that I could push that over and lock that line without it flying off of there. If you do that, you'll thank me later, trust me, because you don't want all this line to unspool. When you aim down, you'll have 30 feet of line laying in the water whenever you shoot, and it'll mess up your shots. Now, we'll take a bunch of extra line off because we got to tie on our arrow. And just pull it down in that notch again. And I think we'll do this one here. Okay. And you go through. See the groove? You go back out the other side. And the fun part is doing an overhand knot with an arrow. I think I done messed that up too. Come on. There we go. Now we'll just slide this overhand knot up and I'll just cut the excess off. It's a lot easier to cut it off than it is to try to work that slack out. Just like that. And I like leaving just a little bit of this tag on there just in case it does get loose on you. You can, it'll give it a little bit of leadway to slide and tighten itself back up. But there you go. And when you go to shoot this, you drop the slider all the way up to the front. You drop the shaft in, knock it on your paracord, I might have to file those nocks open. Nope, okay, there we go. And you can come to full draw, and you're ready to bowfish. There you go. Like, subscribe, comment, and ask questions. We'll see you next time. Maybe we'll see you out on the creek. Guess I should have let that knock dry a little more, but it works.